So for the next round, we'll have 4 speakers. We'll also have a panel. We have interviews and stuff, but we'll start with a keynote lecture by JOCHEN. He's Market Innovation Manager, Power Grid Division at ABB, and he's going to talk about the transformation of power systems and the impact on the data center industry. Please welcome JOCHEN KREUSEL.
Good afternoon. It works, good. So I have the pleasure now to keep you excited after the lunch break. It's always a good slot. I hope we'll be able to do so. As you heard already, I'm from ABB's Power Grids division, so I'm definitely not a data center expert, and I want to give you a little bit an outside view of what happens around this business, and I hope we try to translate that into what it could mean for data centers, and I hope you will find maybe even more points to connect to what I will present. But before entering that, I was told by my colleagues, whom you, by the way, all find outside at our booth, and they are the real experts of what we can do, to mention shortly what ABB can do in data centers, because it may be that not everybody knows yet. ABB is an old company, is one of those that you may say has invented electricity. And not a big surprise, you find us more or less everywhere where it is about electrification or automation and managing systems. And I don't want to go through all the dots. I want to say, if you look at this nice picture from a data center, you find dots everywhere. You find them within the data center, you find them in operational issues, in supply issues, and you also find them on the border to the grid, where I'm coming in. And if you want to know more details, then please get in touch with our people outside who are happy to discuss that further. Let us shortly talk about what's happened in the area of electrification in power systems and markets. We are in Europe. Europe is one of those regions that has most consequently liberalized electricity markets, so markets play a major role in what happens with electricity and how it is provided. We say we are in the middle of a, well, I don't know whether we are in the middle. We are definitely in a fundamental transformation of electrification. And one of the things that is happening is an significantly increasing complexity. And to make that a little bit more transparent, I've brought an example which has become quite famous. Apologies that we didn't find comparable pictures from the Netherlands, but Denmark has, after the Chernobyl incident, as one of the first countries in the world, fundamentally transformed its energy policies. And because of that, they have become more or less the one example, the lighthouse example. And that's why you find these maps from time to time. What you see here is the old world, a country and a few dots. And the few dots were relatively big power stations. Not very complex, you may say. And there you see how this looks like today. And as I said before, we are still on a journey. So much more distributed. The central plants have disappeared. And that is what we see everywhere. And of course, you have a similar development also in the Netherlands, where you have had a rapid growth in distributed cogeneration plants, for instance, around your greenhouse plants. So you have that everywhere. And why does it matter? Well, for data centers. Well, let me give you a first flavor. It means that power systems are today building on much smaller entities, and these much smaller entities are definitely in the range of what you have, for instance, with your UPS systems. So all of a sudden, you may assume that this becomes an opportunity to these markets. In the past, these markets, the operators of power systems wouldn't have even considered to think about such small entities, integrating them in their services, in what they need to run the systems, but today they do. So what we see, we come from a relatively simple, and I've always to say relatively because we are also talking about an industry here, which in our case in Europe is spanning all across the continent. It's a technically interconnected system which has to be kept in balance at any time. So load and generation overall needs to be the same at any time. There is no buffer in the system, nearly no buffer. So what is produced has to be consumed immediately. And that all across Europe. So if I say relatively simple, don't forget this is a challenging and complex and huge system which is run by a lot of independent and companies, entities, particularly as we have an unbundled system. where a lot of private operators are running the assets, and they all have to be coordinated. So if I say relatively simple, it means it has been a big technical achievement to run that stable. It is a complex task, but at the moment it's becoming even much more complex. That's why I say relatively simple. In a moment, I would say we are in a period of transition. We have those decentralized elements already in place. We see evolving business models around them. We see an increasing degree of automation, because that's one of the consequences, that much more has to be done automated rather than by humans. The system in the past was operated with a lot of human intervention, that has to be said. And we're moving into a world which may look even more complex, and it will look even more complex in two dimensions. On one side, we see the distributed elements growing everywhere in the world, but many of them, the majority of them, I would say, are built on natural processes, renewable energies. That's one of the drivers of the change. It was the main driver of the change, and renewables are, on top of being more distributed, more entities, also depending on natural processes, which cannot be controlled, which is the other big difference. Traditionally, we used to control the few big power stations that were dispatchable and enabled us to follow the load, to serve the load. And now we have to coordinate a load which is still doing what it wants and expects to be served, and sources which we cannot fully control. So that's another dimension of complexity, and one of the consequences is that we see the need to interconnect systems even more than in the past. We see that already in Europe. We are talking about strengthening the European transmission networks in order to be able to balance regional excess production or gap in productions. And we are pretty much convinced that we will have even to think beyond Europe. This graph, of course, is very extreme, showing a global network. I wouldn't bet that this is necessary, but we are very sure, we are running very fundamental research on that we have to go beyond Europe. And the very simple reason is weather correlation, combining different weather patterns. So the next slide is quite busy, and I will not go through all of it because we have a limited time. I will only talk shortly about the headlines, and then I will add some more text even. So we are facing more complexity. We are talking about a larger ecosystem, geographically more extended, that's what I said, but larger also in the sense of new players coming in. We are talking about increasing demands from customers, and I think that may also affect you, that customers all of a sudden start to think about where is the energy coming from? Is it green? We know about industries where players have to source green electricity because otherwise it would be in conflict with their brand positioning. So this is new patterns of new drivers in the business that are evolving, and we see new concepts because we will need new concepts, new business models to coordinate all these distributed resources in order to still enable reliability of supply, stable operation of the entire system. So what does that mean in a nutshell? It means we have new building blocks, new technologies are evolving for various reasons, and I will go through a few examples afterwards, hoping that we believe they matter for your business. Certainly there are new challenges. This new world is not easy going. There are expectations, but there are also new opportunities. And just let me give you one example. If you see distributed resources, generation, maybe batteries, demand response mechanisms evolve all over the place, you may assume that there will also be services offered to integrate them into the power markets. And these services can be an opportunity for you, for data center operators as well. So you can assume that an industry is growing that may be beneficial for you. So a few examples of such building blocks and opportunities. The first one is we also see rapidly increasing demand from data centers. And that may, technological building blocks to deal with that may on one side be connect them to higher voltage levels. which should offer, on one side, better prices, electricity prices, better reliability of supply. You may even combine that with DC technologies. This may be beneficial if you have to bring electricity either to very remote places, because then you can use long-distance transmission lines. So we see such developments, for instance, in Northern Europe, in Scandinavia, in order to go to locations where it is cold. You may also see it if you want to go into densely populated regions where you have to bring in double-digit megawatt powers, which usually is not available there. So then you may consider to use a dedicated cable, and cables can be much better combined with DC technology than with AC technology. So I don't want to say there is the one solution for all problems. I want to make you aware that there's a huge range of building blocks, and all of them have been developing quite rapidly over the past 10, 15 years. One of the reasons why DC developed so strongly over the past years was indeed renewables, because renewables tend to be remote. Wind power normally is available in regions where people do not prefer to live. It's even more extreme with hydropower, which you have to take where it is. So the drivers for DC technology were, on one side, China with large hydropower, but also Europe with the need to interconnect with subsea cables to connect Scandinavia with its hydropower resources, and continental Europe with the volatile wind and solar resources. So there's a lot of pull from the market all of a sudden to bring these technologies forward. The same applies even more for the next example, flexibility from storage, which may also be relevant for power supply of data centers, as I understood. Traditionally, we had a few technologies. We have two here. They were the main ones: pumped hydro in power systems, and on the battery side, lead acid. And you could translate them into some areas of application for flexibility, basically load leveling and end-user peak shaving, and there was not much more. Today, for various reasons, development of batteries has been pushed by various markets. It began with mobile devices, which pushed strongly lithium-ion technologies. Now the next push we expect is from transportation, from cars. So there are big industries driving this development, and others may benefit from it. If you look at the new technologies, we see various types of batteries, technologies evolving. We see new areas of application, and I don't want to go too much in detail. I only want to make you aware the number of choices have significantly increased, the areas of application also. So today you can summarize that most of load support or flexibility applications can be covered with available technologies if they make sense. That is a case-by-case decision, but technology-wise, there's a much broader choice than in the past. Last example is one of those new services. This is a virtual power plant. What does a virtual power plant do? You may also call it an aggregator. Well, it contracts a lot of distributed resources and brings services to the power market in an aggregated way. And this power plant here, it's one of the biggest virtual power plants in Europe in the meantime. 9 years ago, it has been a university startup. It's an interesting development, and we are very pleased to be able to support it with a very important building block of the automation system it needs. They are aggregating primarily biogas entities. It started with biogas entities in Germany. Several thousands of them providing control power to the market, primary and secondary control. I'm not sure whether this is it's an expert part of power system operation. It's the fastest response to changes in load that we have. It's in the range of a few tens of seconds up to several minutes responding to changes in load. And traditionally, this has been the domain of the big power plant operators, and no one else was allowed to contribute. The markets have been opened in many European countries, Germany being one of them. And now this company is providing several hundred megawatt of this type of control power based on distributed resources. It may be a very valuable product, depends on how much offering is in the market. Unfortunately, it's a very inflexible market, so you have to have a very good understanding whether it makes sense or not. But that's the value added provided by such service providers, that they tell you whether it makes sense. They take the risk. 700 of megawatt of control power is a lot already. You may understand that it's even much more if you know that a traditional multi-hundred megawatt power plant usually provides only a few 10, 20 of that, because they cannot respond all over their capacity. They can only change a little bit their output that fast. Whereas distributed resources can respond much more flexible if they're coordinated properly. So it's a totally new type of service offering that may be useful also to make more money out of assets that you may have. So let me conclude. Coming back to the 4 building blocks that I mentioned a little bit earlier, we see new building blocks, technological developments, which are very often driven by other industries, by changes in other industries, which means it's worth to observe them. It's worth to look what's happening elsewhere and what opportunities could it offer for your own business. Certainly we see new challenges for the power systems. We see the variable feed in from renewable sources. We see new users like e-mobility, heating, cooling coming, because this will become part of decarbonizing the entire energy system, not only electricity. We see more demanding customers for electricity, and we see a lot of new opportunities evolving from that, and we would be happy to discuss further with you what that could mean for you. So I hope it was a little bit outside your main business. I guess that was our intention, but we hope you believe that you consider it nevertheless to be relevant for you and interesting. And of course, we are happy for questions outside in our booth. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jochen KREUSEL. Can I say that the power grid is turning into a sort of internet?
That is what people sometimes say.
Yes,
that
yes.
It's and there is some truth in it, although it's an interesting discussion where this analogy is justified. What would it mean? We have some ideas on that. One, for instance, is that you need to be able, much more than today, to plug and play to the network as distributed resource operator. There is still some room for improvement. Yes. You may also consider that you need to be able to, well, the internet is famous for its self-healing capabilities, or finding another route in case something is well. The power systems are not yet there. Okay. But we believe that elements of that will be transferred.
Okay. One final question for Jochen KREUSEL? No? Thank you very much, Jochen KREUSEL. Yeah. Next, we will be having a panel on trends on EU digital infrastructure investment and financing. And somebody's going to make my job much easier, as he is going to lead the panel, and not I. So, TIMO BUIJS is responsible for coverage at NIBC in the Netherlands. TIMO, please come forward and announce your guests. Here's your microphone.
Thank you.
Thank you, TIMO.
First, Jens Müller, CFO of Deutsche Glasfaser. Please come on board. Siemon, Dick, Ben, please sit down. No, just sit down. Thanks for joining this great expert panel. Thanks everybody for joining this panel discussion. Today we will briefly discuss European digital infrastructure financing and investment. I will first shortly introduce myself. I work at NIBC Bank. We finance, invest and advise digital infrastructure companies. It's one of our focus areas, and we're really keen to expand this. Hence, we brought in 4 of our clients, which know best how the financing and investment market in the digital infrastructure space is. So may I ask you, Ben, to introduce yourself and tell something about your company briefly, please?
Sure. Ben Bresler, CFO of Hyperoptic. We are an FTTB provider in the UK, founded in 2011, passed about 500,000 homes to date.
Good afternoon, my name is Theunissen. I am the Managing Director of ConneX in EMEA. ConneX builds and operates data centers at the edge of the network. We currently operate some 35 data centers across the US, South America and EMEA, and have a few in the cooker.
In the cooker, that's nice. I'm Siemon van den Berg, CEO from the Data Center Group. We're the largest Dutch independent data center operator, owner-operator, with 4 facilities in the greater Amsterdam region.
Jens Müller, CFO of Deutsche Glasfaser. We are the biggest German FTTH provider. Not sure whether it's a compliment for Germany, but at least for us as a company. As we speak, we have 150,000 active customers with 450,000 homes passed, and based on our, let's say, logic of our business model, we have signed contracts in total for 250,000 customers and more than 600,000 homes passed.
Thanks. So 2018, we've seen a lot of M&A activity. The investment environment was very attractive. Ben, why do you think we had so much M&A activity in 2018?
Well, speaking as a Brit, I think everyone was trying to get a load of stuff done before, I guess, the announcement tonight, whatever that may be. Certainly in the UK historically, and I think I'm talking for Germany as well, we've very much been the laggards of Europe in terms of fibre build, and it's probably about time that we caught up with the rest of Europe and the rest of the world. So I think there's a lot of pent-up demand, as a lot of the smaller players have started to build their business plans and underpin a lot of those, and then it all seemed to have come at a similar time that we're all ready to make that next step.
Jens, any idea why the environment was so attractive?
I mean, when we talk about investors, we have seen also change in the investor community. In the past, digital infrastructure, so data center, fiber, this was primarily from the same industry, so people wanted to acquire the business to gain economies of scale. And now with, let's say, the interest situation where we are, you see also infrastructure funds, you see insurance companies which are also interested in our business, and they have, let's say, different risk profiles and interest expectations. And with this, we see more companies investing in our industry.
Okay. Dick, there was also some M&A activities at ConneX. Can you maybe tell us something about it?
Sure. All of our expansion is basically customer driven. So ConneX does not build data centers speculatively, if you like. And so we had demand from multiple customers in the Warsaw area. And then you look at 2 things. You can either build organically, which we typically do, and in some cases you look at investment opportunities and acquisitions. And in Warsaw, acquiring a company ended up being favorable, right, compared to building our own and faster. And so in the end, we were able to satisfy our customer demand in a better and more economical way.
Thank you. We've seen acquisition multiples increase and increase. I think trading multiples over the last 5 years have increased by 50%. So this discussion statement, do you think the market is basically too hot, acquisition multiples are too high to make attractive acquisitions? Siemon?
Too hard to handle, you mean? I'm not sure. I guess it depends on, because all of the cheap money that's coming into the market obviously drives up prices, as in investors with lower return expectations. Then on the other hand, there's still lots of opportunities out there that are maybe too difficult for them because there's no management in there, or there's maybe difficult assets. There's something wrong with it. And then I would say it's very doable to acquire at attractive multiples and even create value by putting it in a larger platform.
Okay, thank you. Maybe anyone from the audience who thinks that acquisition multiples are too high these days, it's not viable anymore?
Nobody with money in the room?
Okay, okay. So, Siemon, you also made an acquisition this year. What were your greatest challenges?
Good one. Yeah, well, actually, we bought the data centers from the Communication Infrastructure Fund, which is a Rabobank investment fund, maybe a little bit ahead of its game because it's an actual infrastructure fund that was founded 10 years ago. Biggest struggles would maybe be competition in the process itself, and the fact that no management was present. So we had to sort of, well, take everything out of there and manage it ourselves, and that was kind of difficult to to address upfront how big such an issue would be. Which in the end it worked out pretty well, but it's difficult to price in. Yeah.
Okay. So acquisition market still viable, still okay. Let's go to the second question: financing of digital infrastructure in Europe. Ben, you raised a significant debt package in 2018. What do you think about financing requirements in the near future? I mean, your business is growing fast. Any ideas on that?
Well, yes, we arranged a £250 million facility in summer, which was an amend and extend to one that we'd done the previous year. Ultimately, more money allows us to go bigger more quickly. The facility that we took out this year allows us to really underpin a lot of the different parts of our business model and understand some of the market dynamics. So our core business is, as I said before, going after MDUs in the UK. What the additional financing allows us to do is to really understand what the smaller MDU and SDU market looks like in urban environments. So we'll, this year's one of testing and underpinning some of those different dynamics that we see. And then if it works well, then I expect that we'll be back out to the market for a bit more money as well.
Any challenges coming forth? You already mentioned tonight is important. Will that affect you?
It doesn't affect us really as a business. I think you'll start to see maybe the labour market might dry up a little bit, but that's going to affect people like BT and Virgin probably more directly than it is us. A lot of the requirements that we have for a lot more labour actually can be fulfilled from the existing UK labour market. From a personal perspective, it's obviously a little bit different. But as a business, you know, I think some of the handover and no deal causes logistical problems in terms of the supply, but not an existential threat to our business.
Thank you. Jens, you were also active in the financing market. What were your main challenges?
Well, I think it wasn't too difficult to raise 650 million, which we did beginning of last year. And 2.5 years before, we raised 230 million. And this was lasting for 2.5 years of production. This 650 million we just raised, based on the forecast and what I see we are constructing right now, is only lasting to the beginning of next year. So this shows also how we as a company and in general the market in Germany is developing with accelerating growth there. So I would expect that we are doing another round. We are in the second half of this year to accelerate this even further.
Any other type of financings instead of bank financings which you were thinking about?
In terms of other financings, what we have to consider right now, we are also quite successful on state aid money, where we have collected more than 100 million euro in the last 6 months. And this is also something where we think about, is there a way to finance the equity piece in there? But be sure we will come to the market quite soon on this as well.
Well, looking forward to it. Maybe a general question, Dick. What do you think about the current financing environment in the digital infrastructure market? From a banking perspective, a lot of financings became more aggressive. How do you look to financings in this market from a company perspective?
I guess, I mean, with the rate at which we grow, the challenge is more often how inventive, right, our partners can be, and the rate at which their processes are able to follow, right, the rate at which we grow and the need for money. There's a fair amount of supply, as you know. Obviously, we are selective in terms of our financial partners that we want to do business with. So, I mean, the more, it's not necessarily aggressive, I would use the word inventive. And so the more inventive the partner and the more agile they are and the higher their ability to follow our needs at the right time, obviously at the right cost point, then the better.
More inventive financing structures.
More inventive finance structures, yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Simon, would that help you as well?
Yeah, I guess it would, together with execution power, so able to execute fast. And for us, network is very important as well, so introductions, potential customers, etc. So that comes as a plus, obviously, on the debt itself.
Thank you. Let's go to the next question, maybe the most interesting one. 2019 opportunities and challenges. Ben, do you see what do you think are the most important opportunities for you, also related to financing and investments?
I think it's really about how quickly we're able to underpin some of our business plans and some of our assumptions. We've obviously seen some of the big announcements from people like City Fibre, and there's other ongoing ones. TalkTalk made an announcement and then withdrew it. And then there's BT and Virgin, who are obviously continuing to make steps in FTTP. It's really understanding how their plans are going to affect us, what that's going to do for the market. I think in the UK there's a huge amount that nothing's been done with. So there's no need for us all to start competing against each other quite yet. And the overbuild scenario is one that doesn't really work so well for us. You know, it seems like most of those guys don't have plans to go into our major centres. So yeah, I think that's really the big opportunity for 2019. As I said, Brexit has other issues. I think if you look at the overall UK environment, whilst it doesn't directly affect us, whether that has an impact on some of the debt or equity pieces that are floating around is yet to be seen. But you know, we're positive as a company going into 2019. There's a lot of growth, a lot of runway for us to still go down.
Thank you. Simon, any challenges for 2019?
Challenges. I like to think in opportunities, but of course there are some challenges as well. I think especially in the Dutch data center market, 2019 is going to be like very important. Lots is happening in our market. Apparently, it's even on the screen over here. So yeah, this will be the year that the Dutch regional market will be divided, and for us, therefore, a very, very important year. And we're ready to make most of it. Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Also with opportunities.
Definitely. Yeah. So we just did the acquisition half a year ago. We finished integration 1st of Jan. So now our whole team is ready to make a next step.
Dick, any opportunities for you? Maybe not only in the Netherlands, but also in Europe.
There are plenty of opportunities, I would say, across EMEA. I mean, talking in terms of challenges, data centers is obviously a power-intensive business. And so where only maybe 2 years ago our searches would lead with real estate, today clearly they start with the search for power. And in many sort of the flat markets, in any case, power has become a real issue. And so we see our customers divert to other markets that aren't necessarily catered to be able to provide that amount of power. And so power companies across Europe, right, are struggling. We're helping them as an industry. I would think that we're trying to help them and give them insight in terms of what's required in the next 5 to 10 years. Their investment cycles are long. So I mean, we're looking at alternatives to procure and provide our own power. I mean, in Dublin, for example, we have our own gas generation plant that delivers 10 megawatts. And so, I mean, we're trying to be creative. And so I think, I mean, in terms of challenges, it's mostly our ability to find power in the locations where our customers drive us.
Okay, interesting. Of course, inventiveness is really important to overcome these challenges. Maybe Jens, one concluding remark on the 2019 challenges and opportunities in the fiber to the home market in Germany. Probably a lot to happen.
So I think fiber to the home is right now accepted in Germany. Every politician is talking about this. Also, every private person is accepting that bandwidth is key, and therefore we don't have to explain our business model anymore. We have done this more than 300 times successfully. Funny enough, that there is so much money in the market might be a challenge, because it's not only, we discussed infrastructure funds, for example, it's also then state money coming in. There's 12 million of state aid coming in, and with having so much money in, there is a certain risk that in terms of the construction, which we all have to do, prices can increase, because everyone wants to build out fiber to the home right now, and let's say the supply has also to increase. And in order to overcome this, you have to be very good positioned. We are probably the company in Germany which has the best supplier base there, because we have very long-lasting relationships. We are constantly onboarding, and what is very important, you have to be innovative. So you also have to be digital in your entire process. And when we talk about construction, talking about new techniques, that we, at the end of the day, use the scarce resources in the most economic way. So if you ask me, this is probably our biggest challenge, but also opportunity.
Sounds good, thank you. Any